Welcome, my name is Heather, and you are here with Circle Passages. I'm with Buck Pavoni, and before we begin, he's reaching for his great mask, which he's going to get.
How'd you know?
Yeah. But before we begin, and as he puts on his mask, we'd like to give thanks, as always, to TCTV, who is such an amazing community resource. So glad to be here, Buck, and okay, give it to us.
So is this got something to do with what we might be talking about today?
I think it does, yeah.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, we are still in the Easter weekend and dancing, literally today, with life and death. And what is this death and resurrection motif that's part of rite of passage? It's really the central theme. And it's a part of so many different cultures, like your great mask. And this is very Day of the Dead-ish in Mexico, all different places. And along with that is, who are these ancestors? The show before, we had that call to not only awaken to our life and to death, but to awaken the dead, the ancestors, and to serve them. And so how do we do that, and who are our ancestors? Because that's a part of rites of passage too.
And to me, that's always an interesting question. I have a younger brother, it's so important of thinking about lineage and ancestors and whatever that is when you study genealogy, I guess.
I like this though.
Yeah. Because what I like to do is then talk to him about, well, actually with incarnations, you meet with your teacher before you incarnate, and you talk about, here's what your lessons are going to be, but you choose your parents.
Right.
And you choose the circumstances. This is what I'm going to be working on. So to me, that really separates, and it's not like I have from, I don't know, centuries and eons ago, this connection necessarily. It's like each time is really kind of new. So it's always interesting when I hear that word ancestors and the concept of ancestors. Not that, I guess we don't, but if it's a fresh situation every time that we incarnate, so where do the ancestors fit in?
Right, no, good callback. And I know, it makes me think of, because I've really been deepening into this archetypal death and rebirth. So Jesus asked, who is it they say I am? And the answer was Elijah born again, I think. And so I know the early mystics and early Christians, a lot of traditions still, obviously, Hinduism, Buddhism, believe in reincarnation. I know I do, I know you do. This is all finding your own way, but there is this part of, who are we, weaving this thread of our own, to me, incarnating and reincarnating soul, so that the soul would kind of be the thread. And then now we have, with genealogy and the genetics, we know that there is an actual genetic Eve. We all come from one ancestor, one great mother, one progenitor in this scientific sense, but it can also be a mythic sense. So it's just this great reframe. I feel like there are all these different levels of ancestors and ancestry right now.
So that's how we connect, huh?
Yeah, well, all right, we're gonna go.
But have heard that too, of, we come from, we're all one, way, way, way back. And obviously we've all branched out and living our individual lives as well as, of course, family, society, all that sort of thing. But
yeah, and so it reminds me of a time I was actually with my uncle who was in a coma, and my grandparents who were deceased were there, and a cat was laying on him that was deceased, but like, who are our ancestors? A lot of people wouldn't have thought cat, not that it's an answer, but who are these people? Or now we have a lot of research that validates tribal wisdom and knowledge about epigenetics and ancestral trauma and land-based trauma and different things like that. But how do we work with that? And that's a lot of what I think rites of passage are, because they're on the land, healing and transforming together. But that's another way of working with our lineage. And in that, when I went on my rites of passage, I had my maternal lineage show up. Even though I believe in reincarnation, it was very much my mother's lineage and my stepmother were who came up. My grandmother kind of came to me on the rites of passage. So part of it is having an open heart and mind about what is an ancestor, obviously, because I think there are myriad ways that it could show up and be powerful and relevant.
Which is pretty fascinating when you think about that. And I guess kind of going back to the rites of passage of those 3 stages of, crossing the threshold to die, if you would, kind of like that initial part of your 3 days out, is, kind of staying with that, if you would, of really getting the most of what are you experiencing? And it's not so much that I'm trying to drive it. It's let me stay open to what's being presented, which to me is very interesting in stepping into that death zone, if you would.
Right. Yeah, or the death lodge.
Yeah.
That is you construct on the land. And I told you I wanted to be in the earth, and then I found that place that someone had dug out, and I was like, it's perfect. And then I saw that it was just, the perimeter was all snake holes, and I'm like, there is no way I'm doing that. But yeah, how do we go out on the land and then, kind of come back like this person? Not that anyone's going to die, but, how do we come back this light of heart and liberated? Also working with our ancestors, because one of the things that struck me that was sobering was, it's not just me. Like, I know that, but I kind of thought this is a rite of passage, it's about me. And it was like my ancestors showed up for me to participate in their healing, because our healing is linked, it's one and the same. But so part of this is the liberation, is that connection to the ancestors, where you realize the only real way to heal is together, and that we actually have access to people who've passed on in different ways. Again, in whatever way people believe, but that's been my experience, and I know that's a part of the rites of passage. How do we open to help heal our lineages? And then the belief is that then they're healed behind us, and with quantum mechanics and physics, they're healed before us, that there's a quantum power to lineage healing.
My spiritual teacher was Betty Bethards. This was in the Bay Area in California. And she really talked a lot about dreams. So when you talk about ancestors, either family members or, ancestor, or even farther back, let's say, when they would show up in our dreams, it's one of my teachers, actually. But to continue to share of, there's a connection, there's a bond there somewhere, but still, why are you visiting me? And if we're aware enough as we're dreaming, and I've not been able to do this yet, you can ask any question that you want, and they need to answer that. But it's.
I don't know that they do, but I hope so, Buck. I have a lot of lucid dreams, and I think they can actually be frustrated with you. I think they have more autonomy than that. But
so there's the visit, right?
There's the visit.
And as a teacher, what do we usually try to do? It's not always like, I'm going to impart something, but I'm going to share something with you maybe.
Yeah.
And it's what you just said is, so I'm getting stuck here, and you're kind of pointing that out, but how do I get to knowledge or experience, get past this stuck and sticking point?
Yeah, and I think the good point to reiterate, and we all know it deeply, is that this is not going to be a cakewalk, and this is not going to be like what we want. Probably 100% guaranteed in the sense that the outcome will be like love, liberation, transformation. But it's about service. And for me, I was hilariously naive because I didn't want it to be about my maternal lineage. So of course it was, you know, and then that's what I got to spend my time on. But it's really about, part of the dying is almost like opening up, where you literally leave, you're initiated out of that circle that's like, you know, a womb, doulaed almost into death and then back into life through the circle. And out on the land, you're outside of space and time, you're in spirit. And in that liminal space, kind of like All Hallows Eve, you're more susceptible or perceptive to spirit. And so that's part of how the ancestors can come. And then my sense of it, I like Betty Bethard's, it just hasn't been my experience, but is that we more follow them. Like, we have our own autonomy and discrimination and will. But to be with the ancestors and be with the dream and be with the spirit as it reveals itself, and to let it be a teacher, which isn't to relinquish your will, but to see where it's going, because it's guiding us usually beyond our limitation and to something that we can't see yet or aren't open or receptive to. And so that's been my experience, even though it's, again, not a cakewalk. Mm-hmm. And often it's just like death, you know, it's like walking the void. You have to go through something that you probably wouldn't want to, relinquish something, and then you'll get something so much more valuable. But it does require that relinquishing.
It's mindful to me of that, the 3 days again, so death being that first day, if you would, mm-hmm. the second day of accepting what am I here to receive,
right?
In a sense of this is going to be my new self that's going to reemerge, if you would, and mm-hmm. say like that the third day where you're coming out of the fast and out of this mm-hmm. cycle, but that second day again is kind of stay open. Mm-hmm. What am I getting here? Of what's going to be new, you know, and it's like, I guess that's your vision. Mm-hmm. Here's to bring that vision forward later, but it's really get it first.
Yeah.
Just an incredible experience, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's so great, and it kind of reminds me with a bit of humor. The first day you die, but you don't die easily. I mean, some people may die easily unto themselves, you know, unto their past, what they want to die. And I like to look at it as sacrificing it to that funeral pyre as a death process. But death throes, I mean, a lot of it's like, we just thrash around like, no, I won't give that up. No, that's an integral part of me, you know. And so the first day can have some awkwardness around, it almost reminds me of detoxification, but like relinquishing, you know, being willing to die. And really giving that a full process, like not just being stoic and truncating it and being like, all right, I will do this, but really being with it and being like, what do I actually feel like? Welcome, Heather again, and just to get in on the act, our batteries chose to die so they could be resurrected by the wonderful TCTV media crew. And so Buck, we're back at it.
All right.
Go.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is life after death?
This is life after death for batteries. They too are resurrected, yes. Yeah.
We might as well go for the ride then.
Yeah, yeah. And okay, the little pause helped me remember that there was a bit of a poem that I wanted to mention, because we're talking about these initiations, which is to begin or to begin again, and we've talked about threshold, which is that literally this bar of wood, you know, where the threshing, the grains would stay out and it would separate, you know, so that severance, the separation, you have to leave something behind. And so it was striking me that this is a doorway that this great skeleton is dancing in. And so it's this opportunity in this poem that I'm going to just paraphrase is to step through the door. and that you don't have to step through the door, but if you step through the door, you have a chance to remember your name. And so it reminds me a little bit of that kind of birth and second birth, I think when we come in our first birth, often we might remember more even of connection to spirit or connection to nature or connection. And then we get conditioned away from ourselves, from our authentic, from our weird, that ability to be in two worlds. And so it's this return through this door that is the invitation to remember, to put together the pieces. And so that's kind of what this reminds me of. And it just struck me when I was looking at it, looking across at you, that it really is this great example. At first I thought of it as a window, but it's like a door frame as well. And the invitation to step through.
Looks like Skeleton sure wants to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So what inspired this painting? There's a lot of things going on, but
this whole talk about reframing death. And in terms of the ancestors, I have had some different ancestors, like my grandfather somehow knew he was going to die and had everyone come. It was a bit like a rite of passage beforehand, which is something I know we aren't offering yet, but I know we'll offer, is that kind of death is that final transition, gathering community, gathering family. I've seen some beautiful examples of it. But he did that organically. He knew he was going to die. He was in such good shape and spirits that we're all like, hey, did you just want to see us? Yeah. But sure enough, he passed. And I just thought, how great. Instead of a funeral after he's gone, even though that happened too, we got to this chance to have this living, intentional goodbye. But all of the different ways, I guess, looking at my own ancestors, looking at ancestral practices. You mentioned the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but the pyramids, some of these cultures had such evolved relationships with death. And the ancestors. And so looking at, how can we bridge back, and even whether it's reincarnationally or genetically, whatever people's framework is, how can we connect with these ancestors? And of course, this is from the Day of the Dead, where they have rituals. They give offerings to the ancestors. They are in more direct communication with the ancestors. And I think we're reclaiming that. Like my friend who asked, can I invite my brother who died? Can I? And it's like, yes, you can. And I think we've forgotten that you can.
It's kind of also going in the other direction, those who are interested in cryogenics, or how can I
live forever?
Yes, exactly. Freeze myself or freeze my brain, whatever it's going to be, and then come back later when they figure out how do I bring these people back again. So, but dancing through the doorway.
Yeah, and I mean, that is such an interesting one, because we need the circles and the seasons and the cycles to be natural, like the whole sustainable ecological model. And so we're so overpopulated. And so I know you're joking, but I always wince when people are like, we don't have to die. And it's like, that would not be good. It would mean way more death, actually. And in an unjust fashion, like it's women and children who die from starvation. And so one of the 1,000,001 reasons to confront death is that it's just part of this natural flow of the turning of this wheel that is circle passages, is we need to gracefully, which is, its root is grateful, we need to gratefully turn through these cycles and be willing to pass through the thresholds, even if we're a little bit frightened.
Just seems so much it's about perception. How do we actually, what are we open to as far as thinking about this? Because some are so frightened, some folks are so frightened of death, as opposed to, how else can I look at this, where really what we're talking about is, that's of this lifetime, it's going to come to an end, but then I'm going to get to move on
Right.
and be excited about, well, what's the next adventure going to be all about, and what's that going to be like?
Yeah, and I mean, it's so interesting because it's a balance of those, because I'm also thinking, I'm listening to Andrew Harvey, who I'd never listened to before, and I think he's just delightful. But this deep and potent and urgent need to build the kingdom, and it turns out etymologically this mantra, kingdom is queendom, they're the same root, just like God was mistranslated from the plural non-gendered. So we need to build this kingdom, queendom on earth now. So I believe in reincarnation, and we need to save the planet. You know, I mean, it's like, this is kind of yes and. It's like death and life are so present in all these different ways. And even for me, when I think of reincarnation, I had one experience where it felt like climbing in the mountaintop visionary inner experience, and it was perfect because it was what people would think of as anticlimactic, which I think is often the case, where it's like, okay, go back down and serve. You know, it's not like, oh, we've got a cake for you. This, you know, it's like there's way too much work to be done. You know, so it's a yes and, you know, like almost like saying yes to everything and really embracing everything, and not fighting. Like the death throes are okay. We all have resistance. We all have fear. We all have something in the closet and under the bed. But to really have self-compassion and courage to invite whatever is under there out. And it reminds me of shadow work, where it's like the shadow is cast and it looks like it's a monster or a dragon, and it's like someone with a teddy bear. You know what I mean? I don't know, but it's like that kind of thing where it's like, if you do this work, almost always I've found that it's the opposite. Like what seems super frightening is like, oh, it's here to help me. And conversely, things where I'm like, it's all good. It's like, uh-oh, brace yourself, you know.
Used to love to listen to Betty interpret dreams. That would be the first thing that we would do with classes that she had. And this person's describing that there's like a wolf that's just scratching, clawing at her throat. And you think, how awful is this? And really what Betty's interpretation is it's around communication. You're not communicating. So, you know, it's like you could take the worst situation, and she used to do that, well, just interpreting other people's, you think this is a nightmare.
Right.
And yet it's a way, if you look at it in a totally different way, there's really a lesson there. And
Right.
It's not bad. It's not, well, this is awful. It's, here's a wake-up call.
It's a wake-up call. It's getting our attention. Yeah, and you're reminding me of one that I heard like that in my doctoral program, was someone had, like their heart was covered with maggots.
Oh, gee.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty nasty. Yeah.
But, you know, they've been used to eat away dead tissue forever in medicinal, there still are. You know, and so that's what I love about dream work and the power of dream work. And that's, dream and visions are very, you know, Carl Jung said, we've forgotten that those are the age-old ways that spirit communicates with us. And the rites of passage are all about connecting with that, in a way, connecting with ourselves through that. But dream work is so potent and powerful. And it just asks us to sit down with it again, like to befriend the dream and to see what it has to say.
A third of our lives spent sleeping, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that time, even though supposedly a dream is like 7 seconds long,
Right.
but a lot of stuff is going on. But it also seems, you know, it's almost like we need to retool ourselves, if we can stay open, that let me look at another way of considering what death is about, or what all of these things are about, is, you know, step back if you can, and to learn to do that. And again, I think the rites of passage allows for that process. So it's not like you just go right out fast and you're off and running. It's the preparation, I think, that was really cool, and it is very rewarding, is to get a better understanding, because you're really doing it here. It's the individual's journey, right?
Right.
When you're going out there.
Yeah, and the preparation for going, and then, you know, there's the separation, but that's really almost an interesting misnomer, because we hold circle, and I think, you know, every stage deepens into it, but we hold circle, so we die in a way together, and we talk about our wounds. And again, that's one of those things where people are like, enter my wound again? What? You know, and it's Rumi, so many quotes, the wound is where the light enters. The wound is where we have to go to heal. But all of this is done intentionally so that it's held, you know, so the group work, and then you go off on your own, and then you integrate, you know, that separation, transformation, integration, and then you go back into your community, and it kind of ripples out. And I think that's one way that we transform our relationship to death. Is part of it is like we have dead relationships in terms of dead tissue, like the image of the heart. A lot of people either don't speak to relatives or don't speak openly and honestly and meaningfully and deeply with their relatives. It's almost like if there's homework from this, because I'm trying to give, you know, takeaways, is where is there dead tissue in your life? Just like you'd prune a tree, or, you know, like where is there dead tissue in your life? Like leaves that you would pinch off or cut off from a plant. What is dead? And then Brene Brown, I know I've mentioned this, but I'm going to keep mentioning it. She said what she found in her studies was that something has to die for forgiveness, which is a rebirth. Forgiveness is really what allows us, I think, to be reborn. So it's like, what has to die? And that's like the question that makes us like, run away, you know, but it's like, okay, we kind of know, but we have to sit with ourselves a little bit, and, you know, they're there. What has to die, you know?
Think of what's going to be coming, in a sense, to replace this.
Yeah. If it's much better what I'm receiving. And it's almost like, there was a quote on the last page that I didn't read, but it's the surest path is death. Meaning, like, if you don't take risks, you'll die. If you don't live your authentic life, you'll die. You won't live, and that's death. You know, and so it's like you have to think, you know, not only what am I going to receive, which is still a pretty self-framed, you know, gimme, but, you know, like, what is it that's inviting me to live is another way of reframing the what is willing to die.
I know in our society, it seems like New Year's Day, it's resolution. You know, what are my resolutions for? So in doing the resolutions, what do we have to do? We've got to change something, right? We're going to get rid of something and say, I don't want to do that anymore. You know, and for a lot of us, it might be weight loss, let's say. So something's got to change for that. But it's, how can we put it in a way where, okay, I get that.
Yeah,
I'm willing to do that.
Yeah, and that is literally it, because also this is the full moon of Aries, which is the natural beginning of that 12-month cycle. So that is the new year. And so it is like, this doesn't have to be a burning bush. Like, it's probably not going to be a burning bush, you know, but like a revelation of like, what is it that you really need to live? Like, what do you need? And it could be that you just have had all these wounding experiences with weight. I mean, the other part is sitting with why. Like, in what ways have I been killed through these experiences? But yeah, that's a great one. It's just like, it doesn't have to be complex. In fact, it's Lent, it's Ramadan right now. It's the renunciation. Like, what are you willing to give up to live more fully? And we can leave it with that back. Yeah, we've got our hands full.
Can't wait for, will we pick it up from here?
Yeah, you can put your mask on. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm back again.
You're back again, yeah. Well,
a little more colorful this time.
I know, yeah. I'll have to dress up
than
too.
Here.
So thank you, and thank you for dancing with life and death, and really encouraging you to cross the threshold. Not only what is wanting to die, willing to die, but what is wanting to be born again and come to greater life and love, because again, that's the good stuff. And death is the gateway. Don't forget death. Yeah. All right. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, thank you too. Woo. Thank you. That was fun.
Oh, that was fun. Yeah.